The Old Testament reading this morning is Genesis chapter 15, verses 1 through 6. After these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, Oh, Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, You have given me no offspring, so a slave born in my house is to be my heir. But the word of the Lord came to him, This man shall not be your heir. No one but your very own issue shall be your heir. He brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven and count the stars. If you are able to count them. Then he said to him, So shall your descendants be. And he believed the Lord, and the Lord reckoned it to him as righteousness. The gospel reading this morning is from Luke chapter 12, verses 22 through 34. He said to his disciples, Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? And can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your span of life? If then you are not able to do so small a thing as that, why do you worry about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not clothed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which is alive today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not keep striving for what you are to eat and what you are to drink, and do not keep worrying. For it is the nations of the world that strive after all these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, strive for his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Thus ends the reading.
Hardest part when you do is where to preach from. And, the other thing, I don't need to tell you all these things, but I am anyway. I've gotten over since I used to preach a lot. So I have to use glasses now, too. But you'll notice sometimes that's why I'll just go off into who knows where, because I can't see the sermon anyway, so I just have fun. All right, so anyway. Well, speaking of that, yesterday I was looking at my Longmont Times call, and I never knew this, but did you realize that on Saturdays we celebrate Send It Away Saturday? Did you know that? I guess, remember there was the woman that was on a whole lot of the talk shows that was talking about downsizing everything, sort of establishing our feng shui in our houses, trying to get rid of the clutter. Well, I didn't realize we actually have our own person here. So it's Lucy Kelly. It's giving, and I looked this up on the internet, and I noticed she's done this more than just this Saturday, but she's doing kind of this whole thing around how to declutter your lives, how to let go of stuff, how to be able to evaluate what's treasure and what isn't treasure. But I have to admit, I am a victim of one of the most sinister TV shows. And it's surprising that it's put on like the public broadcasting service. And that show is the Antique Roadhouse show. Anybody ever watched Antique Road? Yeah, right? Okay. Man, that has messed me up totally. You know, I'm kind of in this time of life when I should begin to downsize things. As clergy, the conference moves us. So it was easy to fall into this habit of, well, if we can't figure out what to do with it, just throw it in a box and move it. And luckily most of the parsonages are big enough so you could do that, and you moved it around. Well, the last time we moved, though, we moved to a place of our own, Glenn and I. And so we had to start letting go of some stuff. And that's hard to do. Because, some of the things that I have are things like my mother passed down to me, and she was a collector. Or my grandmother passed down to me, and she was a collector. Right? My other grandmother, not so much. She lived on a farm, but the one who lived, in Houston, she liked pretty things, as she called them. Or maybe they were my dad's or my grandfather, whatever the case may be. Or there were lots of things that people and the congregations that I have served, passed on to me, gave me. I bought a couple of those things here. Like, I found this little star here. And that was one of my staff persons gave that to me in one of the churches. And it sits over my head at my office at home. Or I found this pot here. Now, no one really gave this to us, but this pot comes from the Mountain Ute tribe, the Winnemanooch, when we served in Cortez. And this was a part of the Ute pottery here. And so that was kind of something that this particular pot was given as a gift to me another time. I'll tell you more about this pot in a minute. But, there were these different things. And I had meant to bring the little bracelet, the charms and everything. It's sitting in another box to come this morning. But there are these gifts that have been given to me that are very priceless and special. And I kind of have them all around me. In fact, if you look in my office, you'll see a banner that's now hanging on the wall over here. And I always put that banner up wherever I am serving as the clergy person, as the pastor in my office, because that was given to me by my first grade Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Lois Sampson, who was also my first grade teacher in elementary school. And somewhere early on, she began to believe in me that, I might be used by God or the church somehow. So that banner in there reminds me of Mrs. Sampson and her belief in me a long time ago. But the Antique Roadhouse, it screws us all up. Though, because there are those times and those moments when there's this other stuff that I don't even know what it is that I need to get rid of. And I'm almost there. I'm on the edge of it. And then I watch the show. And I watch these vulnerable people being swept up by the experts as they bring things that they had no idea what they were. They just would say, well, this is my grandmother's, this was my grandfather, my uncle got this when he went to France, or whatever the case may be, right? And they hook them because they always ask them, well, tell me something about this. So right now, they get them emotionally involved in those items, and they start telling this little history. Well, my grandfather fought in the Revolutionary War, and this was something that, George Washington gave to him. Okay, well, probably be valuable, who knows? But anyway, but they say the second thing, which really gets them like, well, how much do you think it's worth? Well, I don't know, like $35 or something, like that. But here comes the part that we're all waiting for. Is it going to be less than what they guess? Or will it be one of those amazing treasures that they never knew they had? Right? And then that expert comes back and says, well, at auction, and that's not even really real. I mean, how many times have you auctioned anything off and really got more for it than what it was worth? I guess it does happen. But anyway, they'll say at auction, you could probably get $35,000 for it. Right? And at that moment, everything shifts and changes. Now, this really nice thing that you were given, this lovely thing that sat on your counter or your desk forever, now you've got to go home and secure it, insure it, protect it, and if you're really paranoid, store it someplace, right? Put it away, hide it, so that you can have it because it's now so valuable. You can never get rid of it. And so, well, the trouble is, okay, that's true for those things that are really valuable, but what happens to someone like me is I begin to start asking that of anything I don't know something about. You know, maybe that could be valuable down the way. Like the other day I was looking at the internet, and there was this article about VHSs, right? Made by the Disney Corporation. Any of you have any of these? Now, and the deal was, the really special ones that are the ones that are part of the masterpiece collection. And so now the internet's got me because it says, you know, be careful about throwing those VHSs away. They could be worth thousands of dollars, right? Especially if you have the masterpiece collection version. And so I start looking at it. Well, I do. I'm rich. But then I read another article, and maybe not so much. You know, again, maybe it might be worth what I bought it for, or maybe not. So it's one of those deals, you know, you can't even tell what's of value anymore. Or I was looking at my son's stuff, and in fact, we had almost thrown this little book away here. And I looked at it, and I was, oh wow, there's a few more trading cards here, you know, like, well, and there's sports cards. I wish Biff was here. I hear he enjoys these things. But John, man, I was just looking here this morning, or Roger, I was looking at here this morning, and hey, look at these. Here's John Elway. And here's an Elway one over here. Right? I think there's another Elway there. Elway, right? I was thinking, I just saw that this morning. And I was thinking, wow, these could be valuable, right? At least in this market. Does anybody know? Do we really know how valuable? So in other words, I don't know if I'm holding buried treasure in my hands. Do I need to go home? Right now, and be able to secure this in a safe place? Do I need to insure these cards? Right? Do I need to protect them? Do I need to store this in a place nobody else can find it? I mean, what do I do with this valuable thing? So in a way, a lot of the things that we talk about as treasure are what I might call they're transitional, or transactional, they're transactional treasures. I mean, potentially a transaction could take place between myself and someone else using the treasure as the medium in which there could be a great benefit to me. And so I'm always trying to measure, you know, what is treasure. Now that's a little different than what I might call relational treasure. Because let me turn this pot around. And when I look at the other side of the pot, what it says is 5th annual Pueblo to Pueblo 2-mile run. 3rd place men. All right, it wasn't me. But it was my son, Ian. Ian won this when I think he was maybe just 10 years old. And here's the deal. 3rd place men. That was not 3rd place child. He was running against the guys, you know, the real runners, the pros. I mean, there was like, you know, 500 other guys in this race. And my 10-year-old came in 3rd place. And in fact, he almost caught the 2nd place guy. And some of you know, my son ran for the Fairview cross-country team and played soccer there at the same time. He was doing both sports at the same moment. So he was a runner. Still lives up in the Summit area. So now this pot that's just basic Mountain Ute pot, and probably has some value in that. Oh, now this pot is priceless. This is precious. Because this is not just a transactional kind of treasure that, you know, I could sell to someone or whatever. Or you could hold a plant in here, right? No, this is a relational treasure. Something that has a whole different kind of value than just being a pot. So I'm sure there are things in your life that are like that. And I know, we're in different stages of our life. And many of us probably are in that time of needing to downsize, needing to make some decisions about what we can keep, what we can store. I mean, we know one of the fastest growing businesses are those storage lockers. And of course now they're just not, on a flat surface area. I mean, they're like 6 to 10 to 30 stories high. A lot of stuff, right? We're always trying to make sure that it's secure, that we're able to insure, that we're able to protect. And when we can't store it in our own place, there's someplace else we can. So that's, in a sense, what I'm hearing in this scripture again today. What is it that you call treasure? Now, part of our work as Christians, and part of the work that you have identified here at the United Methodist Church, is to grow spiritually. Because most of what we do is motivated by our relationship with God. Our relationship with God begins to inform us a lot about how it is we live our lives. At least that's how we believe as Christians. Jesus came to show us a way to live our lives. And you remember last week I talked about, for those over here, but if you weren't, I talked about living in the faith. And I shared that the faith, to me, is like a noun. It's not only about your faith in God, but it first starts with God's faith in you. The gift of faith is a gift of love. It's a free gift. That's what we United Methodists believe. We believe in this free grace. You don't have to earn it. It's not something you have to produce, something to get. It is not transactional. That's what's going on in a lot of our churches. And that's kind of one of the things that's a challenge for many of us, even in our denomination right now. We've made a lot of the practice of our faith transactional. In other words, we're trying to figure out what do we need to do to secure our faith. So then we start thinking about what right belief do I need to have? The other thing we start worrying about is ensuring our faith. So what are the right practices that I need to practice to guarantee that when I need to collect on my insurance, this lifetime that I've been trying to earn up God's love and respect, and maybe I'll get into heaven or some other place, whatever, that it'll come through for me. Or maybe we begin to start protecting our faith by only accepting the right people, the right kind of something. Or maybe we start getting into storing up our faith. And how many of you have visited Europe? Right? And so what do you often see in Europe? Gorgeous, beautiful cathedrals. Just amazing collections of priceless treasures. Right? And then you start trying to look around for a worshiping congregation. And if they even have one, it might be like 10 or 12 people that, show up on Sunday morning, and they're kind of put over into the little nave over here, not to disturb the tourists anymore. Right? But they're great storehouses of a powerful faith, that once existed, that reminds us of the presence of God as we stand in the vast volumes of that cathedral space. So we have to be careful. If our treasures and our faith only becomes transactional. Because what I want to continue to point out is, though, our faith should be relational. That's what God is wanting. And so that's why, in a sense, both of these verses ask us, what do we treasure? Here's Abraham, but not Abraham yet. Now he's just Abram. You notice that change, that little difference? He's just Abram. So this is pre-Abraham. He's complaining, again saying, what's going to become of me? What will be my legacy? I don't have anybody that's going to be my offspring. I've got this other, part of my household that's going to claim everything and get everything. But there's nothing from me. There's none of my treasures that I'm going to be able to pass on to anybody. And God says, hey, do not be afraid. Did you notice in both of these verses, that's the first terminology, do not? That's how God begins to answer. Jesus begins his answer, do not. And you'll notice in this particular case, it's not like a negative command. Do not, thou shalt not. It's not like that kind of do not. No, it's actually a rather positive opening to, I'm going to say, do not be afraid. Because, right, this is going to help her. Do not worry because. So we're going to hear that other side in a second, right? Do not be afraid of not having something that you'll be able to pass on. In fact, go outside, Abram, and look at the stars. Count them. For I will tell you that there will be more descendants from you than all the stars that you could ever count. And you remember that eventually Abram's name is changed to Abraham, which means father of many. Abraham becomes this founder of the three great monotheistic faiths: Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. So he discovers this great treasure that God wants to bestow on him. And then Jesus is speaking to his disciples, right? And he's telling them, do not worry. What is it that you're looking for? What are you afraid that you're not going to have? You know, it's sort of like the story about one of the desert fathers who lived out in the desert, in Egypt around the 200s, 300s. And this particular desert father, one day, his cell, hardly had anything in it anyway, was robbed by a great king, his soldiers. They took everything in the cell. And then they left. Well, the desert father looked around, and he noticed, they missed something. There's a pot on the floor. So he grabbed his pot, and he ran after the king and said, "Hey, wait a minute, stop! King! Well, the king thought, of course, he was coming after him to punish him or to attack him or something. But no, the father just said, "Hey, wait a minute, you forgot this. You missed this pot." And he gave it to the king. And the king got off his horse, got down on his knees, repented of his sins, and asked the father to baptize him, and became a follower of Christ. Anyone who had that kind of faith, who really showed what he really valued as treasure, was worthy of following. And that's kind of what Jesus is trying to say to the disciples. He gives them these metaphors of animals and plants. Think about the animals. They don't worry. They're just a part of the way nature works. The lilies, they neither toil nor reap. They are entrusted to God. Their whole being, their whole way of life is entrusted to being a part of God's way of life. And so that's why Jesus ends with that phrase, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Now we have to think just a tiny bit about what heart meant in these days when these scriptures were written. For we know the word in Greek is cardia. The heart was not just a physical beating thing, that we can all feel in our bodies right now. At least I hope it's in there somewhere. But the heart actually was what they thought was the center of business for a human being. Didn't really know about the mind thing going on yet, right? So the heart was the core of your being. The heart was your center. It was the place where you got guidance. It was sort of like God was sending you the GPS coordinates, right? But you had to have some place to interpret those GPS coordinates. Like, well, where am I right now? You can all look in your phones right here in a moment. Go on Google Maps, and it'll say, "You are here." Or if you're trying to, what's that called, check in? You can check in on Facebook and say, "Hey, I'm sitting here." Right? And there's a coordinate that can tell you where you're sitting if you don't know. If you don't know, you're in Niwot United Methodist Church. If you're on the wrong church, you may want to then, no, it's okay. So, the heart is that place that guides you, that directs you. It's the place of your values. It's the place where you start from, but know where to go to out of. You see? That's really important. So when Jesus says, "Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also," then Jesus is talking about what is it that actually then guides you? What are those coordinates? What are those things in your life that you want to make sure are secure? Who are the people in your life that you would want to help find security for? What are those things that you would really want to ensure? Like we have beneficiaries, don't we? We have people that we want to make sure that there might be something that continues to care for them as part of our legacy. What are those things that we want to protect? What will those be the people that we'll champion and fight for? Why do we do the water projects? Why do we provide clothing? Why do we provide food? Because God has called us to help protect those that can't protect themselves always from the forces that are always prevalent in our earth. And what are those things that we want to store, that we want to make sure that are available? I mean, that's sometimes why we have foundations, why we have legacy funds. That's why we have our bequests, our wills, all these things that we're trying to continue to provide the opportunity for life to go on. Because that's what those scriptures were about. How is it that you can provide the continuance of life? What will you do? What will be your treasures that are not just transactional, that are just there to gain you something, but are truly relational, that are there to help everyone who encounters them to be able to gain something? So what could those treasures be? Well, they might be things like knowing that you are loved by God, or knowing that God will give you peace, or knowing that God will sustain your life, or knowing that even if you might be alone in your life, you'll never be absolutely alone in living your life. You know, I wonder if it was what Helen Haas got in touch with over 130 some odd years ago, maybe now. She was one of the earliest members of this church, and she and the women of the church began to collect money to build the first building down in Niwot. You know, they'd started the first version of this church. It was called the Eden Mission, like the Garden of Eden Mission. Such a beautiful place, a wonderful place. But they were going to build this building in Niwot. And you know what they did? They collected enough pennies to stretch all the way from Niwot to Boulder. Now, you didn't mention in history whether she actually laid about and measured that, but anyway, you know, isn't that something? She knew that it wasn't about the pennies, that treasure, but it was the treasure that they had in their heart that was so valuable that they wanted to share it with the people of the left-hand Creek region, this Boulder region, this place that Chief Niwot said that if we come to, we'll never want to leave, right? It was this great treasure. So, what we always have to be in the process of asking is, what are those treasures for us that we want to make sure our life is living by and guided by, that give us that security, that insurance, that protection that we store in our heart, that gives us the power and the courage to continue to step out in faith. So what are your treasures? What do you treasure? When you answer that, you'll actually know where your heart is. And may that heart connect with the heart of Jesus, the heart of God, who loves us all. In Christ's name.